saying in a few hours, or shortly before you watch this, or maybe shortly after you watch this, or I don't know when you watch this. But it's 8 o'clock right here, right now, when I'm recording this. And it's live on Facebook. It's Scarecrow of Oz. I forgot to read last night. Okay, I didn't forget to read. What happened was I was playing Mega Man on the Switch. And the kids were watching, and we were all talking, having a good old time. And I looked up and I'm like, it's 8:30. Whoops. I forgot to read. But I was playing Bounce Man stage, and it's incredibly fun. And anybody who knew me as a child will tell you how much I loved Mega Man. So it's Mega Man's fault. Blame Mega Man. But I'm here now. I'm here now to read to you Chapter 16 of The Scarecrow of Oz. If you recall last chapter, Trot met the Scarecrow, and they found Captain Bill, who's now a grasshopper. He's Grasshopper Bill. And yeah, so chapter 16 is what we're going to read now. It's called Pon Summons the King to Surrender. Gloria had drawn near to the group to listen to their talk, and it seemed to interest her in spite of her frigid manner. They knew, of course, that the poor princess could not help being cold and reserved, so they tried not to blame her. "I ought to have come here a little sooner," said the Scarecrow regretfully. "But Glinda sent me as soon as she discovered you were here and were likely to get into trouble. And now that we're all together, except Button-Bright, over whom it's useless to worry, I propose we hold a council of war to decide what is best to be done." Why would they call that a council of war? Why wouldn't they call that, like, we should have a discussion? We're going to have a council of war. That sounds very violent and mean. I don't know. That seemed a wise thing to do. No, it seems like an overreaction. No war. So they all sat down upon the grass, including Gloria, and the grasshopper perched upon Trot's shoulder and allowed her to stroke him gently with her hand. "In the first place," began the Scarecrow, "this King Cruel is a usurper, and he has no right to rule this kingdom of Jinxland." "That is true," said Pon eagerly. "My father was king before him, and I—" "You are a gardener's boy," interrupted the Scarecrow. "Your father had no right to rule either, for this rightful king of the land was the father of Princess Gloria, and only she is entitled to sit upon the throne of Jinxland." "Good!" exclaimed Trot. "But what do we do with King Cruel? I suppose he won't give up the throne unless he has to." "No, of course not," said the Scarecrow. "Therefore it will be our duty to make him give up the throne." This sounded more and more like war. "How?" said Trot. "Give me time to think," was the reply. "That's what my brains are for. I don't know whether you people ever think or not, but my brains are the best that Wizard Ozzy ever turned out. And if I give them plenty of time to work, the result usually surprises me." "Take your time, then," suggested Trot. "There's no hurry." "Thank you," said the straw man, and sat perfectly still for half an hour. During this interval, the grasshopper whispered in Trot's ear, to which he was very close, and Trot whispered back to the grasshopper sitting upon her shoulder. Pon cast loving glances at Gloria, who paid not the slightest heed to them. Finally, the Scarecrow laughed aloud. "Brains working?" inquired Trot. "Yes, they seem in fine order today. We will conquer King Cruel and put Gloria upon the throne as Queen of Jinxland." "Fine!" cried the little girl, clapping her hands together gleefully. "But how?" "Leave the how to me," said the Scarecrow proudly. "As a conqueror, I'm a wonder. We will, first of all, write a message to send to King Cruel, asking him to surrender. If he refuses, then we will make him surrender." "Well, why ask him when we know he'll refuse?" inquired Pon. "Why, we must be polite whatever we do," explained the Scarecrow. "It would be very rude to conquer a king without proper notice."
I wouldn't give any notice.
That made the kids laugh, and I can't argue with them. The Munchkins are quite amused by the Scarecrow's properness. They found it difficult to write a message without paper, pen, and ink, none of which was at hand, so it was decided to send Pon as a messenger, with instructions to ask the king, politely but firmly, to surrender. Pon was not anxious to be the messenger. Indeed, he hinted that it might prove a dangerous mission. But the Scarecrow was now the acknowledged head of the army of conquest, and he would listen to no refusal. So off Pon started for the king's castle, and the others accompanied him as far as his hut, where they had decided to wait the gardener boy's return. I think it was because Pon had known the Scarecrow such a short time that he lacked confidence in the straw man's wisdom. It was easy to say, "We will conquer King Cruel," but when Pon drew near to the castle, he began to doubt the ability of the straw-stuffed man, a girl, a grasshopper, and a frozen-hearted princess to do it. As for himself, he had never thought of defying the king before. That was why the gardener's boy was not very bold when he entered the castle and passed through to the enclosed court where the king was just then settled with his favorite courtiers around him. None prevented Pon's entrance because he was known to be the gardener's boy. But when the king saw him, he began to frown fiercely. He considered Pon to be to blame for all this trouble with Princess Gloria, who, since her heart had been frozen, had escaped to some unknown place instead of returning to castle to wed Googly Goo, as she'd been expected to do. So the king bared his teeth angrily as he demanded, "What have you done with Princess Gloria?" "Nothing, your majesty. I haven't done nothing at all," answered Pon in a faltering voice. "She does not love me any more, and even refuses to speak to me." "Then why are you here, you rascal?" roared the king. Pon looked first one way and then another, but saw no means of escape, so he plucked up courage. I am here to summon your majesty to surrender." "What?" shouted the king. "Surrender? Surrender to whom?" Pon's heart sank to his boots. "To the Scarecrow," he replied. Some of the courtiers began to titter, but King Cruel was greatly annoyed. He sprang up and began to beat poor Pon with the golden staff he carried. Pon howled lustily and would have run away had not two of the soldiers held him until his majesty was exhausted with punishing the boy. Then they let him go, and he left the castle and returned along the road, sobbing at every step because his body was so sore and aching. "Well," said the Scarecrow, "did the king surrender?" "No, but he gave me a good drubbing," sobbed poor Pon. Trot was very sorry for Pon, but Gloria did not seem affected in any way by her lover's anguish. The grasshopper leaped to the Scarecrow's shoulder and asked him what he was going to do next. "Conquer," was the reply. "But I will go alone this time, for beatings cannot hurt me at all, nor can lance thrusts or sword cuts or arrow pricks." "And why is that?" inquired Trot. "Because I have no nerves, such as you meat people possess. Even grasshoppers have nerves, but straw doesn't, so whatever they do, except just one thing, they cannot injure me. Therefore I expect to conquer King Cruel with ease." "Well, what is the one thing you accepted?" asked Trot. "They will never think of it, so never mind. And now, if you will kindly excuse me for a time, I will go over to the King's castle and do my conquering." "You have no weapons," Pon reminded him. "True," said the Scarecrow. "But if I carried weapons, I might injure someone, perhaps seriously, and that would make me unhappy. I will just borrow that riding whip which I see in the corner of your hut, if you don't mind. It isn't exactly proper to walk with a riding whip, but I trust you will excuse the inconsistency." Pon handed him the whip, and the Scarecrow bowed to all the party and left the hut, proceeding leisurely along the way to the king's castle. And that is the end of chapter 16. Pon orders the king to surrender, or something. What's it called? Pon summons the king to surrender. I hope you join us again tomorrow night in 2021. Woo! New year. Same book. As we will read chapter 17 tomorrow night, The Orc Rescues Button Bright. It'll be right here at 8 o'clock on Facebook Live, presuming the world doesn't end at midnight. Good night, everyone.